Okay, let's get started with another recommended daily activity. This time we're going to work on our arms and our forearms and wrists. We'll start things off with what we call a traffic director. So again, your a postural stance you can use. You can use a staggered stance if you like, whatever is going to give you a little bit more focus. If you need to work on standing posture, remember you have 4 points of contact at the bottom of the chain on each foot. Try to find good balance front to back, side to side. Activate those feet, soften the knees, engage the thighs, engage the core and the buns a little bit, bringing things into a neutral pelvis. Keep your sternum upright as we're working on this traffic director. You can do any variation of these guys. You can do it flexing and extending the elbow simultaneously, alternating flexion and extension. You can do it in different angles, forward and backward, side to side. All right, go into some wrist circles. This real basic idea of getting the entire kinetic chain with your fingers extended. Get everything in that forearm. Even your elbow, a little bit of flexion and extension with a big circular motion. Let the fingers curl up underneath, extend as we reach out. These you can also do in simultaneous or alternating circles. May throw your brain for a little bit of a tease. Threw my brain for a tease. All the way around. Okay, now ball up the fist. Do the same thing. We're still in that good standing posture. Soft through the knees, engage through the tissues of the core, the tushy. Wrist rolls. You can do any direction you want, really. Just get those wrists diligently moving, really working on firing up those forearms. Now we're going to go with hand and finger dexterity. Real simple. You can touch the fingertips to the thumb. Each fingertip to the thumb. Give it a light squeeze. We'll do 2 rounds down and back. And we're just going to do some curling. Every knuckle curls and squeeze the fist. And then extend at every knuckle. If you have arthritic knuckles, you may not like this so much, but do the best that you can to keep them moving so they don't freeze up even further on you. Don't overdo it, just give it real diligent, slow, methodical movements. Let's get a little alternating, a little bit faster, extensions and curls of the fingers, and squeeze your hand, get that hand involved. Let's give it a little bit of a different position of the palm and start moving those fingers kind of like tentacles. Real slowly and diligently getting those things warmed up. Your hands and your forearms should be starting to talk to you now. We're taking a good amount of time on each of these different piano style patterns here. There's some of them that are harder than others. Gotta watch it. Get those thumbs moving, lots of thumb dexterity. Let's do a little shake off of those hands and wrists. We're going to go into a wrist and forearm stretch now. So for the wrist and forearm stretch, we're going to start things off with a basic stretch down. And you're basically pulling into flexion. Flexion of the wrist without flexing the fingers is going to give you a big stretch across the top of the forearm. However, in a moment here, we'll give you a chance to try to flex those fingers. This may not work for all of us, so what we're going to do is make a fist, keep this fist curled up, and then pull it down into flexion of the finger and the wrist. So it's a curled up finger, flexed wrist, and you can rest that side. It's a lot of big stretching. If you're using that, only go to a light stretch. Don't pull too far into it if you're using that curled finger. Now with the other side, we go to wrist flexion. Holding it, just letting those muscles softly relax into the stretch. If you feel like it's able to relax, then you can maybe pull or squeeze a little tighter or pull into it a little more. But we're not going too far in these. These are really hyperactive muscles a lot of the day, so they might be very tight for you. Ball up the fist, and a little combination here of wrist and digit flexion. Those digits, those fingers, and the tendons that cross the knuckles, creating the movement there, pretty darn tight. Big difference between the fingers curled wrist flexion and the fingers extended wrist flexion. Ooh, big difference in my right hand too. This right side, dominant side, way tighter. Gotta work a little more on that one. Okay, radial and ulnar deviation. These are a little bit different. So radial, your radial bone is here on the side of your thumb, and your ulnar bone is here on the side of your pinky. Our wrists can deviate in those manners. It's part of what we're warming up there. And so what we do for a stretch in the radial deviation is we can grab a hold of our thumb. Don't squeeze your joint here. Don't overdo it. Just a light hold of the thumb. And then you can pull that wrist down a little bit. And we don't need to do this too much. Everything is light here, folks. Don't hurt yourself doing these stretches. It's just a light pull of the tendons and the muscles here on the, technically it's the lateral side of your body in anatomical position. So that lateral form, or kind of the front of your wrist, is probably, most of us would know it here, right there. That technically outer edge of the wrist. Okay, so then ulnar deviation, anatomical position, is here, so that's medial. Ulnar deviation is a medial deviation. Well, it's a lateral deviation of the wrist and fingers, but it's a medial stretch. So now we do the same thing. We're going to grab a hold of the outside of the hand, and we're going to pull the hand in toward the midline and see if we can find a light stretch up the back of the forearm, right around the ulnar bone, or the bone that comes from your elbow down. There's a big long stretch, a long muscle that runs up in there. See if you can find that. Not an easy one to find, kind of hard to feel out there. And if you have any wrist health history issues, I don't want you twisting or pulling. Don't hurt yourself again. Carpal tunnel and things like that. These are issues that, you know, these exercises may help and may very well be a good exercise for you, but you got to do it and start with what you can manage. Now, with this ulnar deviation, I can kind of move my wrist a little bit and wiggle, find maybe the slight variety or slight angle that works for you. Okay, let's try both of those on the other side. Radial deviation, grab lightly onto the thumb and pull that wrist, thumb into a stretch. Now while you're doing this, you'll notice I'm not caving my back, I'm not losing much of my standing posture. I'm trying to maintain some activity through the rest of my kinetic chain, but really it takes a lot of attention to do these stretches without putting yourself into a risky situation. These are very fine-tuned stretches. Maybe you don't feel them too much, that's okay. Some of these are tough to coordinate, tough to feel your body out in here. Right into those muscles that control the thumb, and then grab a hold of the fist and deviate that wrist coming toward the midline now to see if you can find this muscle right along backside of the forearm to the elbow. I've got I got two busted wrists, but definitely the right one has a little calcification in the bone that broke that doesn't allow it to move very fluidly. And I'm basically, that happened right here, so I'm basically jamming that bone into my ulnar bone right now, or no, my radial bone. It doesn't feel very good as I'm doing this radial deviation. This is radial deviation. Radial, I think I've been saying it backwards the whole time, folks. So let me give you a clear picture. Radial deviation is when your wrist deviates toward the thumb. Ulnar deviation is when it deviates toward the elbow or toward the pinky. All right, great job with your recommended daily activity for today.